I know many of you are die-hard fans of Little Mumma, and why wouldn't you be, right? She is the perfect crossbody size for when you just need to carry the essentials. Now, she was released 2 years ago today, and she has been so popular. I sell so many of these at my markets. So, what do you do when you need to carry just a little bit more than the essentials? Today, I am releasing the pattern for Boss Mumma. Now, Boss Mumma is not just a bigger version of Little Mumma. She has got a very shaped gusset. It is in 3 pieces to create the shape here where the front of the bag just falls away rather than it being flat at the front. We have split the gusset so to accommodate a handle. Top that off with a 3/4 inch strap. She also has her own feature zipper overlay. Such a quick, easy, fun sew. You can stabilize it as much as you like. You can have it quite slouchy and quite soft. So I'm going to make the tutorial for this Boss Mumma today. And, oh, actually there's more. Little Mumma, her pattern also got an update today. So what did I include? Little Mumma now has wings. So Little Mumma is now got a hip mumma included in the same pattern. So I shall drop the link down below for the Little Mumma and the Boss Mumma. And today we are sewing up the Boss Mumma. Now you know when I release a pattern I do quite a formal tutorial. So today that's what this will be. And in the next couple of months, I will do some sew-alongs with the Boss Mumma and maybe do a couple of hacks. But I also look at a couple of binding techniques today because that might help you out. I hear so many people going, but I just hate binding. Drop anything in the comment of what you suggest for binding. What's your favourite? And I'll get on and sew her now. So let's go through and look at all the materials we're going to need to make our Boss Mumma. So I am using a cotton canvas. Now I have put Coat, which is like a fabric laminator to make it waterproof on here. So I'm absolutely loving that. So we've got 2 exterior body. One I have put the Deckerville with the hole cut out for the zipper. The other one does not have Deckerville, so we still have our Deckerville spare. Now I have used medium weight interfacing on these because it is a cotton canvas and I want quite a heavy structured look, and that's how I absolutely love this bag. With the linings we have got 2 with interfacing on them, and this one I have already fused together and it's double-sided and fused, and you'll see why as we go through and make it. So that's our A body. We then have our base. And I'm using fairly firm vinyl, so I have used 1 Deckerville heavy and 1 Deckerville light. I really do want quite a lot of structure on the base on that because it wants to sit. So then we have our C, which is our gussets. We've got 2 in lining, and I have interfaced those. And I have got 2 in my contrast, which I have interfaced and got Deckerville light. Using the pieces provided keeps it out of the seam allowances. Then we've got our DA and DB. Now you need to be careful when sewing these because one side is actually a curve, which you can see on this check. That is the side that goes to your bag. The straight is the one that has your zip, and I have noted that in the pattern. So we have our Deckerville light, and I have my lining with interfacing, and the same with the DB. Then we have our handle. So at this stage, I'm not putting anything on my handle. It is quite a thick vinyl without much stretch, but you can put some interfacing or put something on that if you wish. So let's look at our pockets. We've got our slip pocket, which is FA, and I'm also going to be putting a little tag in there, so I've attached that. And then we've got our DB, which is our pocket trim. We've got our zipper pocket linings. Now again, I have interfaced those because this is quilting weight and it all adds structure to the bag, and our zipper overlay which will go. So let's look at our hardware. We do need a length of zip that's mentioned in the cutting chart. Use a contrast, use something really funky because this bag features the zips. So I'm going to go with rainbow because I think that's going to look okay with that. 2 for the top zipper, 1 for the front. And we need our D-rings which will be going on our handle, 2 of those. Now I've gone with 3/4 because the handle is 3/4. In your strap hardware you'll need 2 swivels and 1 slide adjuster. Now this is using the strap that's included in the pattern. It's a 3/4 inch strap. If you want to go bigger or bold with webbing, change your strap hardware and keep these nice and little because that's just going to clip on there anyway. So you can change lots up. I'm going with a little backing for my tag to really make that jump. And then we've got our strap ends if we're going to be using those. So that's everything we need. Let's get on and make our Boss Mumma. So we're going to start with step 1, which is our back. So we're working on the A body that has the deck of a light. So what I'm going to do is cut out that hole. Now I do find it easier to cut this out before you start attaching your overlay. So let's put some double-sided tape around that. Now obviously you don't need to use double-sided tape, and if your machine doesn't like it, then make sure it's well away from the edges. So let's put that. Now make sure it doesn't scoop down in the middle, which there's sometimes a tendency for them to do. Make sure it's straight in the middle like that. So what we're going to do now is stitch around the very edge of that, around the curves and back. Now what I'm going to do on here, because I'm using a contrasting cotton, is I'm going to leave long ends and pull them through to the back. So just around the edge like that, all the way around. So that's all sewn. So now we're going to work on our 2 pocket linings. We're going to take a length of our tape that's a little bit longer than our pocket so that we can trim it down as we need to. Now do not use your good scissors to trim zip. So I'll be trimming and melting mine later. So what we're going to do now is take a bit of double-sided tape and put it along the top. Now you don't have to, you can purely clip this in place. So I'm not going to put my zipper pull on yet. I'm just going to put my zipper tape on the right side up along that edge like that. And now I'm going to sew down that seam there at a 6mm seam allowance. So that's all sewn along the top. Now I want to flip that up and turn it right side over. So we've got our pockets right side together, and we want to line that up along the top. So you can either again use a piece of double-sided tape or just clip it in place. And now we're going to do the same and stitch along that edge with the same seam allowance. So what that gives us is our zip the wrong way up on our zipper. So what I like to do, and it makes it so much easier, is just to flatten that out and just stitch down the edges of each of those to keep them down flat. So that's what we've got. So it's nice and flat there. Now what I'm going to do is just put a bit of tape just in the middle over the seam. Now I'm not going to come out to the end, leave about 1 inch on either side, about 25mm. So before you go any further, I do suggest you put your zipper pull on. At this stage it doesn't matter which side you put it on from. So that's like that. So then we're going to retrieve our back. That's got the zipper overlay on it. I like to work on the top first. Take your piece of tape off. Now what we're going to do is line that up that way as well as the teeth over the zip like that. Lift that up and take your other piece of tape off. Now what I suggest doing is moving that out the way and lifting the tape a little bit where you've had it so that it actually levels out, because it can tape with a bit of a bobble where that was. So you want to do that to make sure it's definitely in the right place. So now we're going to stitch around the inside of that, and again I'm going to leave long tails and pull them through. So that's what we've got, our zip. So what you see I've done is I've tied the threads off there and pulled them through to the back. So what I'm going to do is just pull them down here and tape them under here. So they're well out of the way and there's no way they're going to come undone. So now we want to pull the top down so that it's nice and level at the top. Now you can either clip these sides like that, Because what we're going to do is cut around there to be the same shape. Turn that over, pull that back, and we're going to stitch down there, around the bottom, and back up the other side. So what I'm going to do is I am going to trim my zip a little bit, not too much because you don't want them too short, you don't want them to risk coming undone, and you do want to melt that without getting your pocket. So I'd give that a really good melt on both sides. So that is my back. So we should put that aside for now. So now we're going to work on our slip pocket. So I'm putting my label in, so I shall keep that aside. We've got our trim and our slip pocket. So we'll fold that in half, wrong sides together. And we just want to sew down the sides only. Now, you don't have to trim these off. It is entirely up to you. I like to bring it just a little bit off the corner. Get your fingernail right in the corner and push that through. Now don't use anything too sharp, but you want your ends out a little bit. And I just run my scissors down there to get a nice clean seam. And then I'm going to baste along that top edge. Now if you've got any nasties, just give them a little bit of a trim off, like if you've got any frayed edges or anything. Now you can iron this if you want to. Mine's fairly flat, so I'm going to leave that. Then I'm going to get my trim and I'm going to put some double-sided tape just in the center. I've started to do all my interior pockets like this because I really like the whole trim bit on the top. Now we want to set that just less than halfway across the top because we want to allow for the fold. So press that down onto the tape and then press that over to be halfway. I don't know if this tape is going to be enough for this vinyl. I might have to clip it as well. So what I'm going to do now is just sew along the bottom of that, making sure I catch the back as well. So if I keep this at 3mm or 1/8 of an inch, I should catch the back because they are level. So I shall go sew across there, but I'm not going to come past it because we're going to cut those edges off. So if you just run your scissors right up against the edge there, you won't be trimming your fabric. Okay, so now we want to get one of our single A-body linings, one with just interfacing on it. So we want to center this, so just mark our centers. In fact, we should have all our centers marked anyway. Just the tiniest clip because we do have small seam allowances. So that's lined up with the center. I'm going 35mm or 1 3/8 from there, and my center lines line up. Now I'm going to sew down there, around and back up. Now you can then choose to divide that pocket if you wish and have it as 2 small pockets. I tend to do a small one over here for a lipstick or for a pen. So I'm going to one come in about 2 inches from here and do another line to split it. So I shall go and sew those. So that's my pocket all sewn. I'll put my little label in and I've got the 2 little pockets like that. So that's my back. So now we can retrieve our back. Now I'm unsure still whether I'm going to put fleece in it. And if I'm going to put fleece in like this, I always put it in after I've done my pocket because then it's not such a big drop down for your zip. Now I would only use fleece if you're using a light fabric. I'm using a cotton canvas and it doesn't really require it. I just want a really nice structured look. And what I do is I slide that in around my zip. So I'm just going to put a bit of double-sided tape at the top. I'm not actually going to attach the foam. Just want to keep it out of my seam allowance at the top and bottom. So what I'm going to do now is put that wrong sides together like that. And with having the fleece in there, that's going to get a little bit, I'm going to need to make sure they stay down in place. Because you can either glue this, baste it, however you want. Now if you're using vinyl, You might not want to keep basting the edges because the seam allowances are fairly small and you do have binding in here as well. And you don't want to be puncturing too many holes in your vinyl. So if you're using vinyl, I would suggest gluing around the edge. In fact, okay, so I'm just going to put that aside to dry while I continue with the rest of it. So now we're going to need a cutting board, our other exterior, our other piece of deckerville, and our lining. The order in which you put this is really important. We want our body facing up, so we've got interfacing on the back. We want our lining with the interfacing up. Now stack those up so they're perfectly level. And our deckerville light with the glue facing up. So this is my glue side, that's my smooth side, and we want it centered in the middle like that. We then take a ruler. Now I'm going to line this up on my cutting board so I can see where it is, so it's nice and flat there. And we're wanting to come in 1 3/4 from this edge. And we're going to cut through the whole lot, like that. So now we want to move those out. Just keep our deckerville light. And we want to take 10 mil or 3/8 of an inch off the edge of it. Like that. Throw that away. Get our exterior the wrong side and put the glue down, and that's why it's important that we had those stacked the right way. Center that, and we want to fuse that in place. And that's centered, and I always use a Teflon cloth over the top. So now we want to get a bit more of our zip. Now I always do allow a little bit. There is measurements for all your zips in the pattern. So I like to split my zip here, and I'm going to use 3mm tape. This is Express 3mm, so it's quite a high-tack tape. Now we're going to put our zip right side down along each side. We kind of want it roughly about the same distance at the top and bottom, but it doesn't really matter because we'll be trimming it off. You can put more double-sided tape on here if you want. So now we want to put our lining, that's right side down, over the top. Now make sure you line it up at the top there and at the bottom there. You don't want to be stretching it when you push it down at all. So you can clip this in place, or you can glue it, or you can just baste it, however you normally do your zip. So again, right side together, line up the edge, and it's over the top. So now we're going to sew down there and sew down there. So both sides of those. So that's what we've got. We want to fold that over at the zip and line up around our edges. I'm changing clips because this can be a little bit to pressure this in place. Depending on what fabric you're using, it tends to fold back at the back. So make sure your lining doesn't bounce back. In fact, it's probably easier at this stage to clip it around the edges. Because what we're wanting to do now is top stitch down each of those edges. So that is our front all done. Now we want to put our zipper pull on. So we want to make sure that's going to line up along the bottom. So that one obviously is going to be needing to go on first. Yep, now I'm happy with that. So we're just going to take that off the top because we want to then put it back on. So I'm just going to trim that so it's easy to know where it is. because I want this to be in the middle while I'm sewing, and I want it to close towards the top like that. So I'm going to leave that in the middle like that. So if you're putting a logo tag on, I suggest you do that before you close it up. Now I'm going to sew my little box on. Now you can either put it in the middle or put it to one side. Because I've got such a bold print, I'm going to put it to one side. So this is when I have to put my fleece in. So if you're using fleece, again, let's just run a bit of glue. I don't usually use this much glue. Now only use the fleece if you're wanting a really heavy structured look, and make sure it's well out of your seam allowances. So now we need to get our double backed piece of lining that we put like that, and we want to put that at the back. Now again, you can either join this in with glue or you can just add it to the clips. So let's just run a bead around the very edge, because as I said, we've got a 6mm seam allowance or a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and we don't want glue on the inside. Now if you're just using fabric like this, it's no problem at all to keep basting. If you're using vinyl, I would be a little bit careful, because you don't want it to be puncturing lots of holes in your vinyl. So I'm going to line that up at that end and then just work it down into my clips. So make sure it all lines up. So then we've got our pocket in there. Now what I suggest at this stage is sewing across the top and bottom of these if you're not basting, and double backing over your zip edge. So as you can see here, I've definitely gone in line with the curve of the bag. And if you're going to trim your zipper end, have it sitting just above the seam allowance and give that a really good melt. So that is your front. And we'll put that aside with our back. So what we want now is our DA and our DB and the remaining part of our zipper. Now the curved edge is the back, so we don't want to be putting anything on that. So you can split your zip if you find it easier. So I'm going to line that up along there. She'll try some double-sided tape, but this has Oddie coat on it, so it's not sticking very well at all. So again, this is the flat edge of these, not the curved edge. We'll just work on one side to start with, and we're going to put our tape. So obviously I've just cut a length off, which is way longer than I needed. Now you can either clip that, glue it, or whatever you want. So again, I'm going to put more double-sided tape on the back over the edge. Then make sure we're working on the flat edge. Turn that over and put it in line here so that it's lining up that way and that way. Now you can split the zipper tape and do both at once if you wish. I'll just do one at a time. So I'm going to sew down there at the amount we're given in the pattern. That's all done. Give that a nice fold back. Now I am also going to be putting a piece of fleece in here. So then we're wanting to clip this so that it's level at the ends, like there. You might need to push it off the back, especially if you've used something quite thick like I have for the front. So what we want to do now is top stitch down this end and baste around those three. Now if you don't want your rivets going through the whole lot, you don't have to baste this at this stage, and you can put your strap through separate. I like to have all my rivets later going through all layers for extra strength. So that's what we've got. So now we're going to do exactly the same with this piece. Remember, it's the straight edge. So that's my zipper panel all done. I have sewn down both sides, and I have put a zipper pull on from either side. So I shall put that aside for now. We then want to get our handle. Now I'm not putting anything in my handle. This is not particularly stretchy and it's a good weight vinyl. So it's going to be fairly thick without having anything in it. So I'm going to put a piece of double-sided tape. Now you can draw a line down the middle. So we're now going to fold those over into the middle. Maybe leave a mill in between. And yeah, it's not going to stick to my tape. So I shall put clips on it. So now we want to fold that in half again. Now you can either put tape down there or you can just clip it together like this. We don't need to stitch the ends, it is going to be sewn in, but you may as well just stitch your way around. So that's all sewn down both sides. So what we're going to do now is do some measurements. Now all these measurements are from each end, and I do suggest you use a removable pen because this is the outside of the strap. So the first one we're going to do is 1.5 inches, 2.5 and 4.5. Going to retrieve our zipper pull, our zipper, and we're also going to get some double-sided tape. Now we're going to put these, so I line it up like that. I want some double-sided tape between the end in the first one and then between the second and third. So you've just got nothing in between there. So if you line it up, you can see where it needs to be. So now we're going to put that a distance away from here. So don't put the other one on yet. So keeping that there, we're going to stitch over that line, only on that one. Now if you're concerned this is stitching all the way through, you like the extra strength, this is a handle. And so then slide your D-ring on, and you want to give it a little bit of slack around your D-ring. So we're going to take off our second bit of tape, keeping it the same distance from the edge, because you don't want that to be pulling on your D-ring. So now we're going to do the same on both of those, but you can now come in and do the whole lot if you want. So then slide your other ring on, same distance from the edge as we did on the other side. So we want to sew across there at the same time before we slide that back. So I'm going to stitch across both of those and that one at the same time. So we've attached those and those two. Now we want to slide our D-ring down, having the same amount of slack as we've got on that one. Attach our last piece of tape and check the distance is not getting any bigger. So now I'm going to stitch across those two there. So that is our handle and our zipper pull in place. So we are going to put rivets in here later, but it's easier to attach this here before we put our rivets in. So we'll put that aside for now. So we are going to work on our base and gussets. So we've got our exteriors and our linings. What we're going to do is get the thicker end and put it right sides together over the base. Do that on both sides. And we're going to sew down both of those with the seam allowance and the pattern. So we've sewn them both, and as you can see I've opened them and butterflied them, so we want to do that with our exterior as well. Just open them up and sew down either side at the allowance given in the pattern. So there is lots of ways of doing this seam here. The reason I've done it like this, I also get you to mark now your feet. And the reason I do that is because then it's definitely an accurate measurement from your seam if you get your seam wrong. The other reason I get you to butterfly these is so that it sits perfectly flat. If you've got them both going one way, you're going to get quite a bulge in your seam at your base, and you don't want that. So what we're going to do now is mark this for our feet. And we are coming, now you can mark these wherever you want to, but I like to have mine about 1 1/4. So I'm just going to do a 1 1/4 mark down there. From either seam. And then I'm going to come in the same distance from the edge. Now by the time you get your seams sewn, that actually puts them in a good distance. Now if you want to put them further towards the edge, you can do. It's entirely up to you. So there is my bag feet. Don't forget to cover the bottom of those as well. We want to retrieve our handle, and as you can see I have trimmed my zipper tape because I didn't use the measurement, I just used a random length, but I do leave it over a little bit. So what we want to do now is turn that right sides together across the end. Now as you can see, depending on what you've used for your seam allowance on your zip, if it's a little bit different, you may have it different on each end. So just check that, make sure it's all lining up. And because you've got a difference in thickness here, you might need to use a hump jumper to bring that off at the end. So what we want to do is do one side in there, turn it over and put our exteriors in those clips at the back. So your exterior is right sides together and your lining is right sides together. So now we're going to stitch over both of those at the seam allowance and the pattern. So that's what we've got. So now we want to turn that right side out. So just take the exteriors and just turn it like that. So there's our ring. So pull those down nice and firm and top stitch on each of those there. Then the next thing we're going to do is baste around the raw edge of that. So if you line up your seams, so we're going to top stitch down there. Now again, that is quite thick and you're probably going to have to use a hump jumper, and then baste very close to the edge because we are using a 6mm seam allowance. And that will create our gusset ring. So that's our gusset ring all joined. So what I want you to do is line up these centre seams and just check that your centre mark is where it should be. So as you can see, I've added rivets in between there, and my plan is that it is going to come through the back, and that's why we use double-edged rivets or double-capped rivets, because it's actually quite pretty on the inside, but that gives it a lot more strength than just having them through one layer without adding extra deck of a light, etc. So that's our ring. So now we want to retrieve our front. Now I have marked my centres top and bottom. Don't mark the sides, because if you fold it in half that way and mark the halves there, the distance between there and there is different than the distance from there to there because the curves are different. And every critical measurement like this does make a difference when you're sewing curves. So what we want to do is turn our ring through, take the centre of the front, which is the short side, and the centre of the front at the top, line those up. Now I'm going to be sewing with the flat side down, so I want my clips in the top. Put a couple of clips along the top. Now when you're putting clips on something that's going to be sewn on a curve, only put your clips the distance of your seam allowance, else it's going to put it out. Now we want to line up the centre of our bottom with the centre mark on our base, and this time clip almost to the corners. We don't want to be snipping into our zip at all, because that's not a good move to keep the integrity of your zip. Okay, so that's what we've got. Now what I suggest is doing some small snips in here and in here. No more than 1/8 of an inch, because our seam, remember, and I keep repeating this, is only a generous 6mm.
So you might have to take your time and make sure you're not snipping in too far, because the seam allowances are critical in this pattern. So if you want to snip one past in your base, do that, but I stay away from my seam. Now if you're not sure how far it is, one of my testers in another pattern put a little bit of tape on her scissors so she knew exactly the furthest point she could go without getting into the seam. So now we want to bring that around. Now what I find the easiest is to put it around the edge of a table or force it out like that. And over the edge of a table makes it much easier. So I just bring a clip in there and then a clip in the bottom, and as you can see that's going to fit around there really nicely. Now what will happen if you take a seam allowance that's too big? It will actually start puckering it, and you will get it looking like it's baggy on the front and that your gusset's too small. So whenever a designer has done a seam allowance on a gusset, it is designed by the millimetre for that seam allowance. So if you start changing seam allowances, it will definitely change the look of the bag. Now I give you a variance of 2mm, which is actually a lot, and it can, if you go to the bigger end of that, it can change it. It is designed for 6mm. Make sure you're following the curve over your zip. Don't let it drop down. Now if you want to, you can add your binding into the seam. I will do on the second seam so that I show you how I do that, but for this one I'll just keep it as it is in the pattern. So that is where we're going to sew, and I'm going to sew it like that all the way around there at a 6mm seam allowance. So that's our seam all sewn. I've checked inside and everything is as it should be. So now I will find it easier to bind this edge before we do our whole lot. So I start my binding at the top, and I'm using a cotton tape that I have cut just that, and I folded one edge over. So we're going to start at the top, and we're going to fold that over like that. So we're just folding that top corner wrong sides together, and I'm just going to put it around the edge. This bag's quite structured, so I'm giving it quite a stretch. I just overlapped it. So we're just going to stitch around there. I'm going to do that ever so slightly less than the seam allowance. So there's, you see my binding is around all the corners. Now I'm not going to trim anything here. I'm just going to push that around. Pull it, push it around over the corners, because don't forget you've stretched it around the corners. Fold that end under and bring that over the top. So you can see why it would be easier to put this in with the first seam, because then you're not going to have to do the seam we've just done. Make sure that's folded under when you bring it up and over. See, this is why I like cotton bias, because it's not thick, it's not bulky, and if you can cut it out of the fabric you've got, you don't even know you've got binding. So now we're just going to sew around that again, just on the inside of the seam allowance again, making sure it's all up to the seam. So that is all sewn on. Very happy with that. So as you can see, because I put it on the second time, it is easy to see your stitching there. So to avoid that, let's do this the other way. So if you put your binding on your gusset first, now you can baste along here if you wish, or you can, actually let's do that. Let's just baste our binding around there like that. So don't forget, you can kind of see where your curves are going to be, so you want to put a bit of a stretch where that is, where that is. So we're just going to sew along there at about 5mm, so a bit less than 1/4 inch. So as you can see, I've basted that around there. I'm just going to trim those pieces off. So now we want to just treat that like it's our bag edge. So then we retrieve our back. It's a good idea to open your zipper at this point. Line up our centre back, which I've got a little notch there and a notch there. going to be sewing this from that side. Like we did before, just clip a couple of clips on either side. Go to the bottom, there's my mark, and there's my mark. Remember, we're snipping in the corner, don't snip your seam. Now, if you find it easier to staple this or do some other way of holding it in place, please do what works for you. So again, I'm going to sew that from that flat edge like that and go around that seam there. So let's do that. So that's our seam with our binding attached. Again, just over any overhangs, not the actual seam. It's all good. Now this time, because we've got our binding attached, it's just a matter of lifting it over the seam, like we did before. And you've got no seams that are visible on that side. You just want to fold that over. If you would like to, let's have a look at, there's another option here which makes it a little bit easier. And I'm all for easy. I've had a couple of people suggest this to me. So let's give it a try. Get a bead of glue and run it around the very edge of the seam. Just within the seam allowance. Bring that up and over. And clip it over the glue like that. The glue is going to keep it in place. And then you can actually sew it from the other side, which is much easier. Make sure you've got no glue on your hands when you're touching the fabric. But don't put too much glue like I did in that point. And then I can just sew along on the right side, which is going to make it so much easier. So we could have done that on our other side as well. So thank you, Sharon. I like that tip. Let's put that aside until it's set. So that's all the binding done. As you can see, I caught it around all the glue edge. So I'm now going to gently push my corners in. Like that. This is what I love to see, the bag as I turn it. This is the reward, isn't it, for sewing it? Love the feel of the fabric with the oddie coat. It just feels like it's almost vinyl. Push down into those corners. Get a bit of a roll As you can see, I'm going to have to pressure this out a little bit, but that's all part of shaping a bag when you've finished it. So you do need to spend some time shaping a bag. You can't expect it just to turn and it be perfect, and you have to let it sit for a while, let the fabric learn its new memory. Push those out a little bit. So that's her all done. So let's look at the strap. So I am just using the cotton canvas. I have put Oddy coat on this, and so I'm going to use just a strip of tape in that when I fold it. So let's have a look at that. Draw a line down the middle. This is 3 inches, so we want an inch, a line at 1.5 inches. I'll cut my selvage off once I've done that, and I'm going to put the tape right over the middle. So I'm just going to fold it over into the middle. Now my fabric is fairly thin, so I'm going to do it right onto the line and hope it sticks to there. Okay, so it's not going to stick very well. So let's do that at the same time. So now I'm going to put my tape in there as I fold it. You won't see it through the edges because it will be in. Now you can use a thicker cotton tape if you wish. I don't want the strap to be too thick. You could even use webbing if you want. This is only a 3/4 inch strap, so you don't want it too bulky. Now you could of course make a thicker strap and use either reducers to bring it down to smaller swivel hooks, or just bring it down into the D-rings. So now I'm going to sew down both sides and across the ends a little bit further up. I am going to be covering my ends. I'll just take the selvage off. So let's go do that. So down that side, around and back, and I'm doing that at a 1/8 of an inch or 3 millimeters. So let's make our strap. I've got our length. I've got 2 swivel hooks and a rectangle slider. I've also got some rivets, 2 little strap ends that we cut, and they are going to go around the end of that like that. Now you don't need to use these if you don't want to. You can finish the end where you want. So I'm just going to cut some bits of double-sided tape to put down the end. And I'm going to wrap that, so just put it just under halfway so that when you bring it onto there it meets. Now you can edge coat that or you can finish that however you want. I'm just going to leave it like that for now because when I attach it you can either, maybe I'll sew around the rectangle. So let's do that for both of them. And then I'll attach the strap with a rivet. Now you can do both. Leave them wrapped like that. Put it through your slide adjuster. Bring it through by about 2 inches. And then just sew across it right through. So it depends on whether you want to have it sewn through all layers or whether you're just going to rivet. I'm just going to rivet. I will sew down there, across and back on both edges like that, and I'll just put a rivet in the middle. So it doesn't really matter which way up my strap goes. I think I want that side on the top. So whichever you want on the top, fold it, put it down when you put it up and over your slide adjuster like that. I bring that through by about 2 inches. I've got my little rivet tool here which has got the 2-inch spacing on it. I sit that like that, and then I'm going to mark my rivet right in the middle of that, so keeping that at the top and keeping the same side up, put a slide adjuster on it so it's folded over like that. Put this through the slide adjuster and down the other side. So then your strap is like that with that piece in the middle, and we'll open that up and put a rivet in there in a minute. Keeping it that way, go down and through. Now if you want to make these a feature, you could put it the other way and have it folding that way and have the rivet on the outside of your strap. So again, I'm going to put that in there at the 2-inch mark. That's there. That in my lines there. And I know that's the middle for my rivet. So I shall go and put rivets in those because I'm just going to fix my strap with a rivet. So that is our little strap. On our clips. So I quite like that on the outside. It makes a bit of a feature of it. That is our Boss Mumma all done.